Welcome into another edition of New Track Record. Caleb Hatch and Justin Kinney with you. Hello, Justin.
Hello, Caleb. How are you?
Doing all right. And coming off the long holiday weekend, IndyCar at Mid-Ohio, the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, the Honda Indy 200. A race recap for you. Scott McLaughlin of Team Penske, your winner in the Odyssey battery car. First time that's been a sponsor on his car this season. Picks up his second career IndyCar win and his second win of the season. And before I go any further, it was pointed out to me by one of the listeners, not just Independence Day and 4th of July weekend in the U.S., but Canada Day.
Canada Day.
Yeah, it was what, July 2nd?
Is it July 1st or July 2nd?
Maybe it's July 1st. It was whatever Friday was.
Which would be July 1st. Yeah, so yes. I have a buddy that's, his mom is from Canada. He's actually currently in Canada on vacation and sent me a lot of texts on July 1st to celebrate Canada Day.
Just to mess with you, right?
Yeah. Well, it's independent. It's North American Independence Weekend, right? Canada Day and July 4th, Independence Day.
Common thread, both celebrating independence from the Brits.
Right. And the classic shirt or motto that I saw this year about our Independence Day is the British blew a 13 colony lead.
Yes, I've seen that before.
Was the shirt I saw.
I always find it funny that the Brits in F1 hold Silverstone on the same weekend as July 4th.
Right?
Around that time.
It's the
seems
the
intentional
consolation prize, I guess, to with Martin Brundle on the F1 broadcast calling Silverstone the greatest race course in the world. But we'll digress that discussion for later.
Anyway, to Mid-Ohio, Scott McLaughlin picking up the win over the weekend. A lot to get into on this race that unfortunately has not as much to do with the actual racing on the course. It has more to do with race control and team drama. I don't even know where to begin. I guess I'll start.
Do you want to go three things? Is that your top thing to start the race? I
guess with three things, I'll start with race control.
Okay.
Because I thought the caution that essentially handed Scott McLaughlin the lead without having to do anything to defend after that pit cycle in the race. I mean, to me, that was the race. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Like, I understand that they've had a long-standing rule of closing the pits when under yellow.
Right.
But for the first time, I thought, okay, before they used to close the pits right away, and if you're screwed, you're screwed. And then they started stretching it out a bit, to help everyone pit. But this one just seems so manipulated by race control, so inconsistent, that it's like, why are we doing this? Why are we closing the pits under yellow? Can't we just go back to local yellows? Like, what's the point of having road racing if you're going to have full course cautions all the time?
Well, yeah, and every situation's different depending on where the car is, of course, and if it's in a spot where, it could cause issues. But on the broadcast, you have James Hinchcliffe pushing for the yellow to be thrown even later. He wants all cars to have to do that outlap. And it's like, where does it end, right?
Exactly.
It's the luck of the draw, the luck of when the yellows fall in a race has always affected auto racing all the time. And that's just good luck, bad luck. That's just the luck of the draw. Sometimes luck's with you, sometimes it isn't. And now we're coming to a point where we're trying to manipulate cautions so they don't burn a certain amount of people or leaders or guys that are off cycle. It's like, just throw the yellow. If it's a full course yellow, throw it. If it's a local yellow, throw it. I understand why they're doing it. But unfortunately, teams and drivers have a lot of say, and not as much as they used to in this series, but they're still going to complain when they're burned by a caution or, complaining that the pits were closed when they shouldn't be, blah, blah, blah. That's racing, in my opinion, and that's what I think the IndyCar series should say. Every time this comes up, that's racing. Bad luck, good luck, whatever. It's what happens. And instead we have these contrived trying to let everybody pit and all that stuff. And I know people are on one side or the other with this thing, but that's kind of why I said, you know what? If a person wrecks and brings out a yellow at the wrong time and burns you, such is life. That's racing.
Yes. And the fact that Kyle Kirkwood, who had contact, he was the reason for the caution, was literally getting out of the car and they're keeping it green. Like,
right? I know, it's like
either local yellow that corner where you're not allowed to pass and then continue racing, or throw the caution right away. Like, it just, some consistency, and we've had issues with race starts, and they waved off the start of this one, whatever. It's become such a problem with the starts all season that I've become indifferent to them. But this just seemed so manipulated beyond belief of how long the delay was. Like, if you're going to be about safety, then be about safety. If you're going to be about protecting the leaders, then be about that. But just be consistent, I guess, is my issue with all of it. And why are we closing the pits? Like, this is not an issue if we didn't automatically close the pits under yellow.
True.
I don't understand the rule.
Well, yeah. And then you got guys diving in, and then it would result in people that are caught on the wrong part of the track may not be able to pit right away until they're closed and blah, blah, blah. But, I go back to that's racing. And people will say, well, no, it's not racing because it affects the race. Well, not based on who's fastest, who's slowest, but that's how it's been all the time since the creation of auto racing. That's what happens. Sometimes the luck just bites you, and bad luck. And other times the yellow is going to come out at the right time for you. So you're never going to bat 1,000. I just wish IndyCar would be consistent, right? And they're far from it.
If you're going to scrap the danger zone, just warn us, right?
Right. I mean, they just put too much input on drivers and teams complaining about the fact that they would have the fastest race car, the fastest driver in a given weekend, and we're burned by a untimely yellow. You know what? That's life. That's racing.
All right. What's your first point?
I'm going to talk Andretti Autosport.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of mine, so we'll just combine it.
Let's just get after it, because it's been the talk of the weekend coming out of it, and on social media and regular media, overhearing things and having to delete videos and all that stuff. And fact of the matter is, here we are. We're not surprised that any of this is happening. Even Scott McLaughlin comes out and says, that's something that's been brewing all season long.
Fitting he says it in the post-race presser.
Yeah, right. So this is not an open, it wasn't a closed secret. It's pretty been open in the paddock that there has been a lot of angst around Andretti Autosport this year. And it all came to a head at Mid-Ohio on Sunday.
Yes, and I guess we get into it. Alexander Rossi banged wheels with Romain Grosjean multiple times. Also banged wheels with Devlin DeFrancesco. Grosjean and Herta came together. One of the Rossi incidents, it was just side-by-side racing. The other, the wheels touched. The steering wheel left Rossi's hands. Yeah, he didn't have control of the car in that situation, the one that seemed pretty blatant at first glance until we saw the replay. However, those two drivers, we know they don't like each other. This is no secret, like you said. And who would have thought, and someone pointed this out on Twitter over the weekend, who would have thought that Devlin DeFrancesco would be the driver we'd come away with after the race saying, oh yeah, he wasn't really involved in anything. Like, he's not involved in any of the incidents. He was an innocent bystander. As was Colton Herta, not just for being hit by Grosjean, but also for a confusing strategy call by the team. Yeah,
that's another completely mind-boggling thing. We'll get to that in a second. Let's talk Rossi and Grosjean, though. And these are two very similar drivers. They are aggressive. They are confident in their abilities. They drive elbows out. They're not afraid to mix it up. And they're guys that never seemingly do anything wrong on track. It's always somebody else's fault. And when you put two of those guys together on track, and you put two of those type of guys on the same team, both being alphas, then they're going to butt heads. And I think we're seeing that. And I think the reason why these two guys are butting heads so much is because they're very much alike. I think in a lot of ways they're mirror images of each other, even going to the point of coming from Formula One into IndyCar. But coming out of Sunday, I know there was a lot of people that are still throwing shade at Romain Grosjean. And I just felt like it was Alexander Rossi really driving recklessly on Sunday. That's how I perceived it. And I don't know if you feel the same, Caleb, or you are Team Rossi, so to speak.
I feel like Rossi was looking to instigate.
That's a good way of putting it.
Not that it was intentional, but he saw the opportunity to push Grosjean out of the way, and he did it not once, but twice.
Yeah, and the whole steering wheel going out of his hand only becomes a thing after the contact with Grosjean. it became even more egregious after he made the contact, but he doesn't lose the wheel out of his hands if he doesn't make the contact. I mean, there's just two aggressive drivers, and they're too much alike to be on the same team. After the race, Nathan Brown supposedly gets a video of a confrontation between Michael Andretti and Alexander Rossi's dad, then asked to delete it. I never would have deleted it, especially, Nathan Brown was in the right.
Yeah, he was in
a public area, public media
area. I mean, he had a garage access credential, media credential. He can be there. They could have gone back into the bus or the trailer or whatever, or further back into the hospitality area.
Close the garage door at the very least, Nathan Brown makes it a big deal after the fact, but he shouldn't have deleted it, is the point in the first place. But I digress. The fact is, there's chaos amongst Andretti Autosport, and then you bring in the absolute asinine decision or code talk with Colton Herta to try to tell him to pit with code words instead of just telling him to pit when everybody else was pitting.
Yeah, I mean, it was no secret that Colton Herta was confused in the moment, because it's like, and then they caught his radio saying, "Don't tell me a code word, just tell me to pit."
Yeah,
I can't process the secret code words. Just tell me to pit or not. I mean, how hard can it be? And then I think Townsend Bell pointed this out on the TV broadcast, essentially saying, look, everyone thinks every other team is monitoring their radios and strategy. They don't have time for that. Not when literally everyone, the entire field, is pitting due to a caution.
Right. Nobody cares that much. Nobody has that time to do that. And that's just that's just ridiculous at this point because Colton Herta was he was competing for a win.
Yes.
At that point.
It completely trashed his race, and then he had the contact with Grosjean and ends up finishing back in the pack. I mean, he went from almost a lock for a podium, right?
Yeah.
He started third, looked like a lock for a podium, finishing in 15th. I mean, you have 4 cars, 3 of them that we went into the season, we thought, okay, 3 of these cars should absolutely be contending for race wins week in, week out. Best case scenario. He's the highest finisher of what has usually been one of the top 3 or 4 teams in IndyCar for over a decade.
Right. It's terrible. I mean, Romain Grosjean has not performed up to expectations. I think, at the beginning of the season, you asked anybody and they say Romain Grosjean's going to get a win sometime this season. I don't see it over the final, 8 races of the season at this point.
No.
I don't see any indication that Romain Grosjean is capable of winning an IndyCar race at this point. The only person on that team right now is that capable of winning a race is Colton Herta, and he's the only one on that team in the last 2.5 years that's won a race.
And we kind of tend to forget that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a team that hasn't won the 500 since 17, hasn't won a series championship since 2012. It's going to be a decade since this so-called Big 3 team won an IndyCar championship this year. I mean, last Sunday showcased the issues within this team in 2022, but I think it's also a microcosm of what an issue with this team is for multiple seasons now in a lot of ways.
And unless Rossi can win Toronto and some of the key contenders like Ericsson, Power, and Newgarden can have a really bad day, Rossi's nearly 100 points behind, and 8th is the highest placed Andretti car. But unless he can win, an upcoming race and have a bunch of other contenders have really bad days, which could have happened on Sunday, but instead, what do? Championship drives, right? And we'll get to that in a bit. But it's going to take race wins plural by Rossi to be a true championship contender. And for Colton Herta, I mean, yes, he's been inconsistent the last couple of years. The talent's there, the speed's there, but it seems like lately it's been, execution, not necessarily on his end. Last year we saw a couple races where he made a mistake. Yeah, he made a mistake at Long Beach this year. He made the mistake at Nashville last year. But we're seeing stuff just completely... I mean, maybe the mistake on Carb Day. True. That one also on him. That ruined his 500. So I know we're getting into the mailbag a little bit, but I think this is a time to bring it up in terms of us putting out the question on which is most to blame for Andretti Autosport's recent struggles. And this was a Twitter poll that's still open, but soon to close. 42% people said the team support staff, so engineering, pit crew, because we've talked about the errors
They are 26% driver lineup, 22% Andretti, 2 focused on Formula One, 10% other, and we'll break that down a little bit more later. But, it leads into the question for you, Caleb, is what do you say is the reason that Andretti Autosport is struggling?
Can I cop out and say all the above?
I think it's I don't think it's wrong.
I mean, is the driver lineup going into the season, we thought it was improved, right? Because you had Hinchcliffe and Hunter-Reay, the tail end of their careers as full-time drivers.
Right.
Guys that we could still maybe see in the future running Indy 500 one-offs. I mean, that's not a surprise. But as far as full-time, probably be a little surprised if either of them get a full-time IndyCar ride again at this point.
Yeah.
So you add Grosjean, who had a solid rookie year. You got to remember he won a pole. He had some podiums. There was a lot of promise. And he started the year with a couple of good results going into May. And then it just seemed like his season's tanked outside of that fourth at Road America. The driver lineup seemed improved. Rossi is clearly improved this year as far as getting results and being a true contender once again. But you look at the lineup, you don't have as much veteran experience. Then you look at Michael Andretti himself. Is he distracted by the F1 stuff and trying to get that nailed down? Is that a distraction? You look at team leadership, and you've had a lot of the same people in place. Are there people, we thought last year they'd clean house with a lot of the team leadership and pit crews. Has that happened? I don't know. I mean, it's not like we're getting the hiring and firing list of Andretti Autosport here. Obviously not.
Well, that's not in the transactions.
No, it's not on the waiver wire.
Does this team need a de facto president to run their IndyCar operations? As Michael Andretti is running around and kissing the ass of Formula One people, do they need somebody on the ground like a Taylor Kyle that's running the operations like he does at McLaren or elsewhere, or like a Tim Cindric at Penske? Does Andretti need a president of Andretti Autosport's IndyCar program to really run the day-to-days and allow Michael Andretti to continue to grow the organization? I think he's done a great job doing that. You could debate whether it's been the best of ideas, but you can't argue the fact that Michael Andretti's eyes on other series is taking him away from the priorities that are in IndyCar.
I mean, Rob Edwards, the COO, I guess that's like the closest that we have to that, but that's not a president.
I don't know how much operational control he has, though. You know what I mean?
I mean, he's a strategist, and he does obviously some operational stuff. That's the title.
Right.
But, I mean, you look at the fallout from this, too. Mark Glendening of Racer.com had some quotes from Rob Edwards on this, and Glendening says that Andretti followed up one-on-one conversations with all 4 drivers in the days since. Edwards believes there's not a fundamental team problem that needs to be addressed, but rather specific personality conflicts, widely understood to be between Alexander Rossi and Romain Grosjean, who were already being monitored prior to Mid-Ohio, will continue to be managed over the balance of the current season before Rossi departs for Arrow McLaren SP. Well, and they're testing it at Iowa today, Thursday, as we speak.
After they talked on Sunday individually to the drivers, or collectively, I think it was, Grosjean still called Rossi an idiot twice in the post-race. So there's no love lost there, obviously, but that also goes back on Michael Andretti. You need to hire the right people and the right drivers in the right situations. And you need to be able to see that Alexander Rossi and Romain Grosjean are way too alike to get along in the paddock, and you need to have a hierarchy. I think you look at teams like Ganassi and Penske, and each of the members of those teams in the driver paddock fit a certain aspect of that team, right? Whether it's conversations saying, hey, Joseph Newgarden's the alpha, or this, this, that, or the other, this is where you fit into the team. I don't think those conversations are being had at Michael or Andretti Autosport, or if they are, they're not being followed, because you can hire a driver the caliber of Romain Grosjean, but you know what? If he's going to rub elbows and have issues with another one of your top drivers, then that would be an issue. That wouldn't be the best hire for the team, right?
No. And Edwards goes on to say all 4 engineers work well together, particularly Olivier Boisson, who's on Romain's car, and Jeremy Millis on Alex's car. Adds the chief mechanics and crews get together. There are personality issues, in quotes, I guess I would term them, that needed to be addressed and have been addressed. But it's no secret. We watched Drive to Survive. Grosjean and Gunther Steiner didn't exactly get along swimmingly either.
Right. You could say the common thread there is Romain Grosjean. I don't think he's the easiest person to get along with. His driving style isn't conducive to having a fruitful relationship with teammates, but you also have to remember where he came from, where your biggest rival was your teammate, right? So that is a tremendous fundamental change from going from Formula One to IndyCar. And overall, there's just a lot of personality issues at Andretti Autosport. I don't think there's one particular reason why they're in the spot that they are, but it's a team that, in my opinion, has been usurped by Arrow McLaren SP as being the third best team in IndyCar.
And when you look at this, how much did this hiring of Grosjean actually push Rossi out? Was he already out the door?
Surely didn't help, right?
Before the season started, or when it became clear to Rossi early in the year, I'm not going to get along with this guy, and you lose the experience and the friendship that he had with Ryan Hunter-Reay and James Hinchcliffe being teammates. I mean, obviously they're still friends, but you lose that on the day-to-day, weekend-to-weekend operations. Did he feel like he was on an island?
Probably didn't help the situation, but then again, looking at Andretti Autosport, do you cater to a driver that hasn't won in 2 years? So if you go to Alexander Rossi, say, you're still our number one, we're going to build around you, we're going to hire other drivers that may not be to your caliber, but we want you and Colton Herta to be the face, blah, blah, blah. Does that really help Andretti Autosport, considering Alexander Rossi has not been able to perform to win races the last couple of years? So everybody's got an angle. Everybody's got a reason why they're doing things. And I'm not going to say this reason's good and this reason's bad and right or wrong. The fact is Andretti Autosport has an absolute cluster on its hands right now. And they have to be thankful that Colton Herta's dad is on his box and part of the organization. Because last weekend, aside with the confusion, I don't think Colton Herta would stay with Andretti Autosport if his dad wasn't there, if his dad wasn't part of the organization. If he had an option to go to any of the other top three teams without Ryan Herta being in the picture, why wouldn't you go?
Yeah, I mean, Andretti does one thing. They create loyalty with their drivers, but then it always seems to come to a falling out.
Eventually it ends at some point. So,
do you think things get better after this race because things have been addressed and there's been a confrontation about all of it?
I don't think behind the scenes things get any better. I think that's a relationship between Rossi and Grosjean that's too far gone at this point. I just think they're cordial with each other and probably say all the right things just to be able to keep that perception that things are better.
I guess my question is more so, do you expect more fireworks on the track between those two this season?
I hope so. I don't know if it's a probability, but look how much we've talked about this. I mean, this is what we wanted, folks. This is what the drama that we see in Drive to Survive, whether it's real or contrived. That's what we've all said is needed in IndyCar, and we don't expect it to happen amongst teammates, but here it is. So I'm going to enjoy it as long as it lasts. I hope this is a storyline that continues, and at the very least, hopefully it's something that carries on into 2023 when they're on different teams.
And you have two of the most popular drivers in the series, too.
Doesn't hurt.
It helps with that. Okay, so obviously that was my second point as well.
Okay, so we'll go to my number two, and let's talk about Scott McLaughlin getting the win. Guy that we mentioned even last episode, Caleb, as since the first two races of the season has kind of dropped off in consistency, particularly the last 4 or 5 races. Here he goes back and wins his second race of the season, second career race in IndyCar, and he seems like a guy now is back kind of in the conversation in terms of a championship.
I would agree. I mean, he's got a lot of points to make up.
But now
he's
we're
in the conversation.
And now 6 wins for Team Penske this year through the first 9 races. Not too shabby.
No, and you look at what McLaughlin did. I mean, look, it's not his fault that he benefited from the weird delay on the caution. Right place, right time. Props to him and his team for executing that perfectly and for taking advantage of Pato O'Ward's struggles. I think McLaughlin, Road America to now, I mean, he got his confidence back. It doesn't help your championship when you have a terrible Indy 500. It is what it is. He had a terrible Indy 500 crashing out, finishing in 29th. but he's slowly bounced back. Do I think he's going to be the series champion? I mean, he wants to, obviously, and they mentioned on the broadcast he's studied Alex Blow and what he did last year. Could he go on a hot streak and win a couple more races and find himself in true contention? Absolutely. I think it's, as always, it's going to come down to someone winning 3 or more races. The fact that Newgarden's already won 3 and is third, he's 34 points back? I mean, that shows you how consistent Will Power and Marcus Ericsson have been at the top.
Marcus Ericsson, 321 points, Will Power 20 behind. Joseph Newgarden looks like 34 behind. But I think there's a lot to gain. I mean, you look at Alex Palou, who has 0 poles, 0 wins, sitting there in 4th, still within striking distance. If he can get a couple wins, even over the final 8 races of the season, his consistency towards the top of the finishing standings, race after race, puts him in contention even without a win yet. So still a lot to be decided, but it was good to see Scott McLaughlin kind of shake off a bad string and put together a good race and gets a win. What's your number 3, sir?
Well, I was going to go with Penske because they won 6 in the 9 races, but let's go with Rinus VeeKay for my 3rd. Finishing in 4th on Sunday, putting some outstanding moves on the track.
On the outside even.
Getting, what was that, Dixon and Newgarden, right?
Yeah.
With that pass. I mean, that was a phenomenal pass by VeeKay. A huge bounce back performance. A top 5, his first top 5 since the pole and podium at Barber.
It's the mustache.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
He's got the rooster mustache from Top Gun.
Between the heavy mustache and the very dense eyebrows of Rinus VeeKay, he's got the facial hair going on.
He does. And I have to say, I mean, this is a huge performance by him this weekend when we compare to how Arrow McLaren SP performed with separate engine issues. We'll get to more on that later with just all the Chevy issues. But I think to me, this was a big bounce back weekend. He pulls ahead of his teammate Connor Daly by 5 points in the championship. And whereas Daly has had a string of just kind of 12th, 14th, 13th place finishes, mid-pack, VeeKay with a really strong result, not only I think sets himself up well for his team the rest of the season. You got to get results when you're a young driver. You feed off confidence, right? So right. I think this will be big for him and his confidence.
I agree. And especially when he's, what we think he's basically looking to get that 3rd McLaren seat. It's very much a tryout, I think, in the latter half of this year to see if he can string together some good results. And this is a step in that right direction.
Absolutely. All right. Your 3rd?
I could go a couple different routes here. Let's talk Chevy. You mentioned it, and you look at both Arrow McLaren SP cars having issues, including Pato O'Ward, who led 28 races or 28 laps. Felix Rosenquist was in the top 3 when he started fading. You look at both Foyt, or 2 of the Foyt cars, and Calderon and Kyle Kirkwood had issues. Eilert, Kellett also down there. Is this a team issue? Is this a Chevy issue? And do we think this could continue?
So Mark Glendenning of Racer.com talked with Chevy IndyCar program manager Rob Buckner, and the breakdown as far as the issues for Pato O'Ward, a fuel supply issue. That, again, not a surprise. The number 7 car of Felix Rosenquist. He says, definitely on our side, a quick engine failure. We don't have that one root caused yet. So unclear.
Which was a little weird because
on that
it like hit like the pit limiter and then was okay going through the gears, and then it was completely gone.
Then the 11 car of Tatiana Calderon, shifting issue on the team side. 77 car, odd engine event that led to an engine failure in retirement.
Odd engine event. You never want to hear that.
No.
Odd engine event.
The fact that 2 of these, they have no clue
right.
what happened yet.
A little bit concerning.
Concerning for sure, but all in all, they were 1st and 3rd, Chevy on track at a Honda-sponsored event. I don't think they're too mad about it. Now, what it comes down to, he basically said they were all engines that were in the 2,000-mile and up range. So initially you start thinking, do we have some major issue around the 2,000-mile mark? They're all pretty unique. So they were close to mileaging out.
Got it. So feast and famine for Chevy. You mentioned it. First, third, and fourth with Rinus VeeKay, and then the bottom 6 in the final results as well. So hopefully just a one-race blip for Ilmor.
Yes. Other notes from Mid-Ohio as we wrap up things from Mid-Ohio over the weekend. TV ratings, well, less than stellar.
Not great, Bob.
0.57 rating, 877,000 viewers. Now, Nathan Brown of the Indy Star pointing out that last year this race ran on July 4th itself. It was the best non-500 TV rating for NBC to date, 1.303 million viewers for comparison, and that was a race dominated by Joseph Newgarden. So that's very concerning for sure. And having that context, I mean, that makes it even worse. Also, though, last year, the race led into NASCAR Cup race at Road America on NBC. This year, it did not because Cup was on USA Network. And to put it in perspective, okay, yeah, it's not going to get the Cup rating, but SRX, better rating. Xfinity on Saturday on USA Network got slightly more viewers as well, 881,000. Not ideal. I don't know what else to say. It's not great.
It wasn't good. Anything under 1 million is not good on network. And that's kind of where I don't care what's on, what other things are going on, what holiday it is. I don't care. 1 million is that number. You surpass that, I'm happy. If you're under it, it's a disappointment.
Yep. I really don't know
that's
what
kind of
else
where
to
I'm
say.
at.
And I think what's concerning is not only have the TV ratings largely gone down since Indy, they keep dropping, it seems, week to week.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're not being hit over the head by NBC PR after each week saying their IndyCar is 8% up from last year, 13% up, or 21%. I don't know if they're even up at this point. I don't know. I guess we'll see at the end of the year. But the fact that they aren't touting such a thing makes me think that they're pretty close to what they were last year, or at least not as high as they would like to. You and I said it from the start of the season. If IndyCar isn't up double-digit percentage points from last year, then it's a disappointment.
Absolutely.
And why would NBC then give IndyCar 14 network races next year if they can't show the growth that we all expected?
Exactly. 9 pole winners and 9 races. Pato award-winning pole at Mid-Ohio for his first of the season. Just incredible stuff there. Miles Rowe picked up another win back-to-back now. He has the championship lead for USF 2000. So big weekend for him. Scott Dixon had a comment to Dylan Welch on NBC. This paraphrase from Tony DeZino. Today we looked like an IMSA race. I think race control needs to work out where they want to be. I'm fine with that as long as it's consistent. That's all anybody asks.
Consistency is all we're asking, not just in the calls on track, but we saw the start waved off initially. And that goes to the drivers, I feel, in that respect. I mean, I still don't think we've had a true come-to-Jesus meeting within IndyCar to cut out the shenanigans of cars. I thought Pato O'Ward was going way fast on the warm-up lap, and nobody could catch up, really. They waved it off, and even when they started it, it was better, but it wasn't 11 or 12 rows. That's for sure. It was maybe 6 or 7, maybe 8. So that's even before you get to the inconsistent calls. And, we see it on ovals. Guys hesitate, then try to start, and you get the accordion effect, and 3 or 4 cars get into you. And you know what? If you're having 28 cars out there at Iowa or whatever it's going to be, and cars start doing that, and you have an accordion style, you're going to take out 6, 7, 8 cars before you even come to green or get through one lap. So I still feel like there is a big issue with that IndyCar is just simply ignoring. And the drivers are basically policing themselves out there and how they start races.
Green Savory Promotions tweeting this out. Scott McLaughlin, halfway to winning all the Green Savory IndyCar events this year. He won St. Pete.
Yeah.
He's won Mid-Ohio, Toronto up next.
And Portland
as well on the schedule. So we'll see if he can pull off the sweep of all 4 events. A couple of notes on some driver stuff. Nathan Brown, per Zach Brown, Pato and Colton's TPC testing programs with McLaren will take place after the IndyCar season is over with, likely in October or November. Also, we learned this during the race weekend. Jimmy Johnson update.
Did not crash.
Well, did not crash. Also, he told Jenna Fryer and Nathan Brown, nothing changed. He still has no firm deal set with CGR and Carvana for a full 23 season. And for Jimmy Johnson, his best road course race finish, I believe, at 16.
I do believe, yeah. Now just stayed out of trouble since there was a lot of attrition. So, but still, the fact that he did not even did he wreck, we never saw him. That's a good thing for Jimmy Johnson.
And David Malukas, another good result for him, 9th place, highest finish of the season, first top 10 as well. So another driver to make note of with a good result for him. Okay. That wraps up the Mid-Ohio recap. If you agree or disagree with us, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can find us at newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, sign up for our email list so you never miss an episode. Also, check out the store. We have stickers and t-shirts for sale. You can also support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. We have 4 different pricing tiers. Thanks to Rob for his support and others for your support of the podcast. On social media, our Twitter handle is IndyCar Podcast. On Facebook, like us, just search for New Track Record. And on Instagram, IndyCar Podcast is the handle. And you can always email us, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com with your questions, comments, or IndyCar-related rants. All right, Justin, time for the mailbag, and we have a ton to get to. So we'll try to get to this as quickly as we possibly can.
Let's roll.
We'll start with Rate the Race for Mid-Ohio.
You know, I give it a 9, and I know you're going to scoff at me because you have a differing opinion, but I thought in terms of intrigue, in terms of excitement, there was the perfect, in my opinion, amount of yellows to reset the field, and it was great restarts and great action on the restarts. You know, the drama with Andretti Autosport, anytime there's drama, I think it bumps it up. You know, for a track that at some times has gone without a single caution and pretty monotonous, I thought it was a pretty solid race, so I gave it a 9.
I'm going to give it a 7.5. No on-track passes for the lead. Shenanigans by race control. Yes, the Andretti drama was great, but that wasn't really battling for any noteworthy positions. I don't know. I've turned into the pessimist.
I said it before we started broadcasting here. I don't understand. You were the optimist. I was the pessimist. This is how it worked, and now it's seemingly switching.
Yeah, maybe one day it'll switch back. All right, ton of responses from all of you on Twitter. Brafog says 10 because I attended Mid-Ohio for the first time and had a blast. Went with my buddy nearly 20 years to the day since we went on our first IndyCar road trip to Cleveland. Our 11-year-old son met all the drivers and made another lifelong fan. IndyCar is my happy place. #I am Indy. Yeah, I did not make it to Mid-Ohio this year. If I were at the track, I'd probably have a much higher rating because I love going to Mid-Ohio. It's fun. Right? It's a fun time.
It is.
Hunter's Way 67, as an Andretti Autosport fan, a 1. As just an IndyCar fan, an 8. Also really bummed for Felix. He had a great car and was poised for a podium. Zach needs to put more focus on his IndyCar team. Insert sarcasm. Jamin T14, I'll give it a 7. Lots of action throughout the field, and the Andretti drama was great. Human Spectre 1, 8. For me, this is one of the best races Mid-Ohio has seen in the past couple of years. So much to take in from it, and all the passing was refreshing. Happy for Power. My dad, Hunter's Way 67, said he had no chance to move up to the front. #family rivalry. He showed him. Poet Shevchenko says 6.5. The racing was great and really merited an 8. But the BS IndyCar has been doing with keeping the track green so some people can pit before going yellow has got to stop. Obviously, keeping the pits open under yellow is safe, or they wouldn't be breaking their own rules. If the track needs a full course yellow, you throw that flag. Keeping the track green when it should be yellow is more dangerous, in my opinion, and getting everyone slowed down by the caution and letting them come into the pits that way. The only thing I see each race they do this is that they know the rule change is garbage. They're too stubborn to correct it. I fully agree.
You have Caleb's full backing on that comment.
It cut away from my enjoyment of the race. NK Harden says 8. It would have been a 9 if there were a pass up front. The craziness from third on back was wild all day. The top 3 were untouchable, no matter who those 3 were. The drama inside Andretti team meetings is a solid 9,000, though. DC Soda gave it an 8.5. Bum for the McLaren guys, but lots of action today. If Andretti's going to implode, it may as well do it 100%, which they absolutely did today. A lot of haters. Cole the Show Bear said 6, very mid for Mid-Ohio. Canuck _ 9, good race. Big D Cart, 9.75, great crowd and unpredictability throughout. Mike Jarrett 33 gave it a 10. Giant Smiling Man, nice handle, solid 9. BK Hickey, our answers will likely differ greatly from Michael Andretti's answer. Yeah. I Am Analog gave it a 9. I was very entertained. Happy for McLaughlin. Power's run was incredible, as was Newgarden's. Wonder who was more PO'd during the race, Power or Grosjean. Lee Walk 7. 8 for excitement, 5 for racing. Winner gets the lead based on a weird caution call. Hazelnuts, 8.1. Very specific. Wish IndyCar Race Control could button up the initial starts for once and figure out when to consistently throw a yellow.
Yes.
500 Indy 1911. What number is wild? The race to the front was overshadowed by the chaos mid-pack and back. Meanwhile, Will Power avoided all that and carved through the field. Andretti drama that has been around forever finally bubbled over. We didn't talk about this enough, but Will Power, phenomenal drive, especially after the early spin.
After the early spin, he started him back anyway because of the impeding during qualifying, which really wasn't his fault. It was basically didn't know that Elio was there. It was kind of a weird situation because it sounded like the team didn't even know he was there. But for Will to do what he did, not let Saturday define his weekend, not let that spin define his Sunday, and drive exceptionally well to get back up towards the front. Great drive by Will. And those are the type of drives that can lead to a championship.
Racer Mac RTP 1. I'll give it a 7.5 to an 8. Not exactly thrilling up front, but the Andretti drama was entertaining, and Will Power from the tail to the podium was all sorts of cool AF. And that is Rate the Race. So again, a lot to get to there for Rate the Race. Now we'll get to Team Grosjean or Team Rossi. And you posted this poll, so we'll take a look at the results so far on the poll.
I think Team Rossi is ahead by a considerable margin. Well, we set it up and said Team Rossi, Team Grosjean, or Team Indy Rivals.
I chose Team Indy Rivals.
This is the final results with 121 votes. Team Rossi at 50%. So 50% of you are backing Alexander Rossi in this drama. 37% said Team Indy Rivals. Just 12% Team Grosjean. So the guy that's the alleged most popular driver in the sport gets just 12% of the support in this nice little rivalry we got going on at Andretti.
Responses on this poll, Brafog says, listening to Roman's radio at the track, I heard the team tell him to remember to work with his teammates. He responded, he put me into the effing wall. His team then reminded him that he's a lap down and his teammates were not.
But this is the thing. He's only a lap down because of his teammate. Like, I kind of understand where Grosjean's coming from in that respect.
True.
Right? So why should I help my teammate in front of me who put me a lap down?
Yeah. Your point is valid. So it's very valid.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking at in that respect.
Nick J. Fletcher, I don't think it's Team Rossi or Team Grosjean anymore. It appears that it's Team Grosjean or Team every other driver in the IndyCar paddock. Seems that Grosjean is miraculously not at fault when he collides with multiple cars every weekend. It's always the other car. Seems odd. Poet Shevchenko, the feud among teammates will only grow as that team connection is severed. And he posted a photo of Senna Prost colliding back in Formula One back in the day. Jeremy from HBG, is it okay if I find them both insufferable on the track?
That is totally fine.
Absolutely fine.
I, in some ways, feel the same. And in some instances, like coming out of Sunday, I was like, both of them are pretty stupid on track.
Indy Nathan just posted a GIF that said chaos. Phil_Barksdale, a GIF that said let them fight. Daniel SCM 2004. Grosjean is quickly developing a reputation in the paddock as a hothead and a crash waiting to happen. Similar to his time in F1, he had popularity from Drive to Survive, but is fading fast. The Phoenix is going to find it hard to have another rebirth.
Real quick from Connor Ferguson, who is live at, I think it's Iowa they're testing today, and an interview with Romain Grosjean asking him about the run-in last week with Alexander Rossi, and quote, obviously last week it wasn't really any of my fault. So going along with the lines of some of you saying Romain Grosjean never takes responsibility, but I think that goes for Alexander Rossi as well, in my opinion.
More Rate the Race responses. I mentioned there were a lot, and I'm getting to the rest here. Sig Domer gave it a 4. Seemed like everyone from driver, engineers, strategists, and race control forgot what to do after summer break. Fit J 1983, 4.5, was about 7 till that weird late caution call. If you know a car is not getting out of the way, throw a caution. If you keep racing, you basically acknowledge that it's safe to have a car stuck on track. Yep. Jeff Zerneski, an 8. The cautions, willpower, and the Andretti Autosport drama added to what is normally a race won from the front row. While McLaughlin started on the front row, he did not look like a clear-cut winner. Made you watch till the end. Jeremy from HBG, I give it 10 bruised Andretti driver egos out of 10. Phil _Barksdale, 6.5. McLaren cars DNFing from podium places costing some potential action up front. The Andretti drivers forgetting they're on the same team made up for that. John Campbell, 47, gave it an 8. It's probably my ceiling since I don't recall an on-track pass for the lead. Great drives by Power and VK. Tough battles throughout the midfield mixed with Andretti insanity. DeGuerra gave it a 7. I like drama as entertainment, but it went a bit over the top with all the cautions and the Andretti drivers starring in their own reality show. I like that. NBC focusing on Jack Harvey's onboard camera for an extensive period of time with 7 laps left in the race was weird. Well, yeah, that's the Hy-Vee promotion, but yes.
It is. We had our with 10 laps to go through the field, take a shot. It was a very good point. One of them had that we missed out on a lot with the McLaren cars going out because Pato and Felix both had cars that were definitely locked in and both competing for a potential win.
Yes, absolutely. Scuba Steve 85, 8 for the race. Lots of action throughout the pack. I give it a 10 if they aired the Andretti debrief. According to Stitch, 8 on the Mid-Ohio curve. Willpower doing willpower things was almost as impressive as the utter implosion of Andretti Autosport. Swinks and Z, since Scott McLaughlin won, I'll give it a big 10. 5 sheep from Swinks.
Very nice.
Blue Onyx 500, 8.5. Transocean Trojan Racing was only a 6.5, but the Spectacle was an 8.5. Thanks to all the drama and the Andretti cars waging war on each other. Okay, I think that finally covers all of the Rate the Race entries. Honestly, I don't think we've ever had that many for an Indy 500 and just the responses. Thanks to everyone for responding because that is...
It's awesome, yes.
It's great. All right, so on Andretti Autosport's recent struggles. So another poll that you posted, I'll let you pull up the results for that one on who is most to blame.
We kind of went over this a little bit, but looking at the most recent results, team support staff, in terms of which is most to blame for Andretti Autosport's recent struggles, 42% said the team support staff, 26% driver lineup, 22% too focused on Formula One, 10% other, and we have several responses to this.
All right, the replies to that, Vicky Lynn, 26. It's kind of an all-the-above situation. Too many cars. 3 seems to be the sweet spot. Colton coming in and outshining his teammates. Big egos, Rossi and Grosjean. And the whole F1 thing has definitely been a distraction. Jeremy from HBG. Lack of focus on winning the races you're in now. It's an interesting point.
Mm-hmm. As opposed to
F1.
Later. Yep.
NK Harden, I voted F1 focus. They've been pursuing this for years now. And seems to overlap the most with the last few years of IndyCar struggles. Even the one driver that has been good, they have been more focused on his F1 future than IndyCar. Can't disagree there. Indy Oreo, John Oriovitz. This is an old story that's repeated itself several times over the last 15 years. It's the ingrained culture of a lots of cars team spread very thin, led by a guy who was a terrible teammate as a driver.
I find that comment fascinating because John Oriovitz covered Michael Andretti as a driver, and for him to come out and say basically he was a terrible teammate. Now he's running a team that has several teammates to deal with. You know, maybe the leadership isn't the best in terms of those guys getting along. And he also makes a point, spread very thin. I mean, this is a team that probably should have a 3-car field in IndyCar and maybe a 4th for Indy. Instead, you see 4 regulars, 5 at Indy, sometimes 6 at Indy. I think they're just stretched too thin, not just in other series, but in IndyCar in particular.
Yeah, you look at the golden era of this team back when it was Andretti Green, 2003 roughly to 2005. You didn't have Marco on the team. You didn't have Danica on the team. And then you had Kanan, Weldon, Dario, and Brian Herta.
Right.
And that's the golden era. And you also had Honda, and you were the Honda factory team. Exactly. Continuing on, P. Gaynor 14 says inability to adapt to the aero screen and too many small mistakes on all sides. True. Rossi still hasn't won a race since they introduced the aero screen. Hunter's way 67, poor pit crews. CGR and Penske rarely, if ever, have bad stops or poor strategy calls. The F1 fascination doesn't help, though. Tyler_Allen, leadership and too many irons in the fire. Bauer Racing says there's a whole lot of suck to going around. James Jordan, all of it. T.E. Francis, there are numerous factors, including turnover of crew, engineers, critical mistakes in race strategy, tire strategy and pit stops, an inability to qualify at the front, and occasionally a problem with the Honda engines. All right, and some comments on the Mid-Ohio TV rating. Brafog said, sorry, it would have been 877,001, but I was there in person. My bad.
Come on, people.
Nick J. Fletcher. All right, it's official. Move it back to August. I want to keep 4th of July lake traditions and go to Mid-Ohio. Campground looked empty, ratings down, and it's not convenient for me personally. 3 major, in all caps, reasons IndyCar needs to consider. Poet Shevchenko just says that's just depressing. And run_Mark_run says F1 is the best time slot for summer races. I watch IndyCar on replay at night on Peacock. Just not willing to sit on the couch for 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon. NASCAR people are just NASCAR people. I don't try to figure them out. Well, he has a point.
I can't remember outside of the 500 a race that I've watched live, the last race that I've watched live. Either it's a half hour behind, 4 hours behind, 8 hours. I don't know. You know, this weekend I was away on Sunday, watched it in the evening. I actually watched Formula One first and then watched IndyCar.
I watched some of F1 live and watched IndyCar, like a day later.
Right? So,
I mean, it's a holiday week and people are busy.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, that's the mailbag. Thanks for all your submissions. Time for news and notes and a few things to get to, but nothing crazy. Silly season stuff. Nathan Brown of the Indy Star talking about a decision for McLaren on Felix Rosenqvist's future. Zach Brown telling Nathan Brown an announcement on his Swedish driver's future is likely to come in the next 30 to 60 days. There's a timeline there for you. Marshall Pruitt had a silly season article that came out before the Mid-Ohio weekend on Racer.com. Nothing really super shocking here, but Takuma Sato, Dale Coyne Racing, they have an option on Sato that Dale Coyne expects to exercise. David Malukas, multi-year deal. We already talked about Linus Lundqvist, high probability for a third car. Covered Rinus VK, Connor Daly, multi-year contract. Everything is good with his crypto-based sponsors, despite the volatility there. Juncos Hollinger Racing wants to keep Callum Eilert. Eilert intends to stay. And no changes expected for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. Again, none of these are surprises. Projected car count of 28 next season as of now. Obviously, things can change.
We shall see.
And this from Joe Saward, who covers F1, but some IndyCar nuggets. Daniel, as in Daniel Ricciardo, has a McLaren contract for next year, but it's fair to say that he's become a disappointment. Despite winning last year in Italy, one might conjecture that McLaren might offer Daniel an elegant exit by putting him into IndyCar. This is not yet confirmed whether Felix Rosenqvist will race IndyCar or Formula E next year, but spies in the U.S., I love that he uses the word spies, are suggesting that it is not a real option as McLaren will be running Pato O'Ward, Alexander Rossi, and Alex Palou, the current IndyCar champion who is currently racing for Chip Ganassi. Throwing it out there, I'm not sure the truth to it, but
very difficult to see that happening. But I mean,
would agree.
Elegant landing for Daniel Ricciardo going from Formula One to IndyCar. Look, I'm an IndyCar fan, but that's not an elegant landing to me. You're going to go from making $40 million or whatever it is to Formula One to making $2.5 million in IndyCar.
And then Cape Motorsports, they'll advance to Indy Lights next year, so more expansion as they plan to contest the season. They purchased 2 new Dallara IL-15 chassis, so good news there is more expansion to Indy Lights. And it seems like there are more teams on the way as far as announcing they will move to Lights. So that's a look at some more on Indy Lights. Congrats to Robert Wickens. His son was born last week, Wesley Joseph Wickens.
And then one in Canada.
Yeah, last to first wins at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park.
Very impressive.
So great weekend for him. Also, Logan Sargent becomes the first American to win an F2/GP2 since 2015. That was Rossi, right? The last American to win in that series.
Yes, that's correct.
Arrow McLaren SP announcing Circle K official partner for them during the Indy Toronto, coming up here in a couple weeks. And I thought this was interesting. We normally don't cover every single sponsor announcement, but Hub Insurance will be the primary sponsor for Christian Lundgaard at Toronto. And okay, Hub Insurance, whoop-de-doo. Well, they follow this up that Hub Insurance insures 13 of the full-time IndyCar drivers.
Ooh.
So that is working inside the paddock. So
I'd like to see those bi-weekly insurance payments.
Oh, man.
How much does it cost to be covered?
I'm sure it's a lot. And we mentioned testing at Iowa Speedway ahead of the Hy-Vee IndyCar weekend. Andretti team there, Ed Carpenter Racing there as well. And also they made this announcement. All fans welcomed for free Family Friday, July 22nd for the first day of the weekend. They'll have Indy Lights and IndyCar practice, evening access to the track, infield paddock, all for free. There's the IndyCar and Indy Lights autograph session. These are the kind of promotions that ovals need to do to get people to the track.
Yeah, definitely. And looking up as well, Connor Ferguson again, he took some pictures of some upgrades at Iowa Speedway. It says, quote, "I'm told Hy-Vee is putting together these impressive additions in turns 1, 3, and 4, and they look like hospitality zones. They're like covered kind of paddocks. Looks like it could be suite type things, but they seem to be permanent structures," is what Connor Ferguson says. So another investment by Hy-Vee into making this event a big one. And, I think we'll address this in future podcasts, but with the amount of capital that Hy-Vee is putting into the IndyCar series, both with Ray Al Letterman Lanigan Racing and the series in general, how much longer are they satisfied with having pretty much a backmarker racing their car in Jack Harvey?
Probably after next year.
I mean, I know he's tied in multi-year deal with Jack Harvey and with RLL. I get it. But at the same time, Hy-Vee is going to have some say in who's driving their car, considering the amount of money they're spending.
Absolutely. Okay. That wraps up the mailbag. Not a ton to get to, obviously. Tweets of the week. First one from Jenna Fryer. IndyCar race seems drunk. And then this from NK Harden. Grosjean may achieve the nearly impossible task of going from the most popular driver to the least popular in one season.
Well, I can guarantee you that he wasn't the most popular driver in the paddock last year when he won that award. And I put him as the most exciting driver because he was bringing drama. We love it.
All right, time now for our Raynham Split Air Driver of the Week.
All right, we're going back to kart this week. We're going to the 2003 season, your favorite kart season, of course, and we're going with Rodolfo Lavin with Walker Racing. Raced the entire season in 2003 for Walker Racing.
I think I've actually heard of this name because it sounds familiar from looking at previous seasons and potential Raynham Split Air drivers.
He was a veteran, I would say. Had parts of 3 seasons in kart/champ car, including both 2003 and 2004. He raced with 3 different teams in 3 years. Walker Racing in 2003, Forsyth Racing in 2004, and CTE HVM Racing in 2005. And actually had a runner-up finish at Road America in 2004. But the year in which he raced for Walker Racing, looking at just 3 top 10s that I see on first
Surfers,
glance.
Vancouver 8th, and Lausitz Ring, right? The German.
Yeah. Lausitz Ring in 9th. 18th overall in points, but a little on Rodolfo Lavin from Mexico, and most notably raced in the Champ Car World Series. He raced in Formula 3, raced Atlantics with Michael Shank Racing. Maybe we'll ask Michael Shank about Rodolfo Lavin next time we have him on. He was not particularly successful in either Atlantics or Indy Lights. Best finish of 6th in Lights, and I think it was portions of 4 different seasons, 5 different years racing Indy Lights. Can you imagine somebody now racing 5 years in Indy Lights?
No.
Amazing. But regardless, despite his lack of success in Indy Lights, in which he did set the record for most starts with 58 in Indy Lights, he moved up to Champ Car in 2003, drove a disadvantaged Reynard chassis for Walker Racing, mediocre rookie season, but then managed to sign with Forsyth. He was not a consistent front runner, of course, usually behind teammates Paul Tracy and Patrick Carpentier. And then in 2005, found another ride, joined the HVM team halfway through the season. He tried to get a Corona sponsorship for the 2007 season, but no deal was made. currently living in San Luis Potosi, and is one of the owners from the Santa Ursula camp.
And he was sponsored by Corona in 2003, so that's where that comes into play.
So a guy that never won a race in IndyCar, but spent a lot of time in open wheelers between Indy Lights, Atlantics, and the Kart/Champ Car World Series in the mid-90s to the mid-2000s. So Rodolfo Lavin, this week's random split era driver of the week.
All right. We'll be back next week to discuss any more silly season rumors for IndyCar, any more fallout from Andretti Autosport, and to preview the return of the Honda Indy Toronto for the first time since 2019 at Exhibition Place in Toronto, Canada. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. Thanks for joining us on another edition of New Track Record Podcast.
Podcasts by Federated Media.